Not long ago, I was talking with several author friends about writing great characters. It was the kind of freewheeling conversation we often have, and one writer used a word that surprised me, so I looked it up later. It's a simple word with complex uses: agency. Merriam-Webster's first definition is the contemporary or modern day use, as in an advertising agency or an entertainer's agent. In today's world, agency is most often thought of as the office or function of an agent, or as an establishment doing business for someone else. But at its core, the word agency has a broader and yet more specific use. For today's purposes, I want to talk to you about it in storytelling. In storytelling, agency means action. Let's be very specific. Agency in storytelling is a character's ability to make meaningful choices and directly influence the events of the narrative you're writing through the character's actions and decisions. Essentially, it's the free choice, the act of agency, that drives character-driven plots and allows for character growth in the modern-day fiction. Characters with strong agency actively shape their destiny in the story rather than simply having things happen to them. These characters make decisions, both good and bad. They take action to solve problems, and they face the consequences of their choices. Now, why does this matter? You're writing a book, you're writing about characters, you make them up anyway. Well, it matters because strong agency, especially in your key characters, creates engaging narratives readers can't put down. And here's why. Readers understand the cause and effect relationship between a character's decision and the story outcome. For example, let's think about Jane Austen. Jane Austen's Elizabeth Bennet repeatedly makes choices that go against the social conventions of her time. She refuses 2 marriage proposals, and she speaks her mind freely, oftentimes to the shock of the people around her. Her agency drives the plot forward and reveals her character growth. In contrast, characters with little agency, life happens to them. They serve more as observers or victims of circumstance, being moved through the plot by external forces rather than their own decisions. You might think of Elizabeth Bennet's younger sister, who was so unhappy and played the piano. She definitely had very little agency in her life. Or here's a more modern example. Princess Leia in the Star Wars saga. Her actions consistently drive the plot forward through her choices and determination, rather than simply reacting to the events around her. From the beginning of A New Hope, Leia demonstrates remarkable agency. When her ship is captured, she doesn't surrender passively. Instead, she takes immediate action by hiding the Death Star plans in R2-D2 and recording a message for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Even when she's captured and tortured by Vader, she refuses to reveal the location of the rebel base. She maintains her agency through resistance. In The Empire Strikes Back, Leia continues to make crucial decisions as a rebel leader. She organizes the evacuation of the Hoth base and later decides to help Lando betray the Empire. Action. Specific steps to control what happens to her and the story around her. Her romantic relationship with Han develops not because of fate, but through her active choices and the changing perspective of her character as she grows. This is character growth driven by agency. I think Return of the Jedi, however, showcases her strongest agency. When she infiltrates Jabba's palace, disguised as a bounty hunter to rescue Han Solo, and then, when that initial plan fails, she adapts and she takes advantage of her opportunity to personally kill Jabba during an escape. Later, she actively participates in the mission to destroy the shield generator on the Endor moon. What makes Leia such a compelling example of agency is that she consistently makes difficult decisions under pressure. She takes initiative rather than waiting for rescue. She adapts her plans when circumstances change. She balances her personal desires with her larger responsibilities. She faces the consequences of her choices. She's a real person, And we begin to see her as a real person as she grows and continues to grow as a character. Even when the narrative places her in seemingly powerless positions, she was a prisoner, a princess in need of rescue, she still refuses to surrender her agency. And instead, she finds ways to influence events through her actions and decisions. The tension between agency and fate creates a fascinating dynamic in storytelling, particularly in genres like romance, where fated mates and insta-love tropes are common. This relationship is complex, and for a writer, it opens doors, windows, paths, and entire highways down which character-driven agency can take a story. In many fated mate stories, the initial attraction is predetermined. You might think, then, what does that have to do with agency? How does that work? Well, whether it's predetermined or not, how the character responds to the bond that is initiated is a matter of choice. Let's talk about the classic enemies to lovers variant for plotting. The characters might be destined for each other, but their initial resistance and their eventual acceptance represents their agency within the constraints of their fated destiny. The journey is not about if they will end up together. The journey is about how they navigate getting there. That's where the story is. Han and Leia's romance beautifully illustrates the balance between fate and choice. At first, they genuinely dislike each other. Han thinks Leia is arrogant and demanding, while she sees him as selfish and unreliable. Their attraction emerges not from a mystical bond, although it might be there. Their attraction emerges through shared experiences and growing mutual respect. When Han tells Leia, "I know," in response to her declaration of love, it's a perfect encapsulation of how their relationship developed through genuine understanding rather than cosmic destiny. Goosebumps. Even now, as I'm thinking about it, I remember the feeling when I watched that scene for the first time in the movie theater. There were gasps and ahs around me and smiles. Mine too. The audience knew these characters, knew the growth, knew the challenges they had to overcome to reach this point. What makes their romance compelling is that both characters actively chose each other, despite their differences and their initial dislike of each other. Leia chooses to see beyond Han's mercenary facade, while Han chooses to embrace commitment and the larger cause. Their love story resonates because it feels like it's earned through character growth and conscious decisions. It feels real, and we treat it as if it's real because they take action. Now, maybe Han and Leia do fall in love because they were meant to. The element of predestination can still be part of their relationship. But without question, it is their own actions that drive their growth as characters to become people we love. They took action. They chose to overcome their differences and recognize the value in each other. And that agency, that action is a testament to their agency as characters. As a writer, think of agency as a river. Think of the current, the flowing water, as fate. The current moves in one direction, but how the characters navigate the water, the current, is the agency. As the author, you control the agency. You create the characters. For memorable stories, give your characters the strongest agency you know how to give. Your readers will thank you. And you'll enjoy it a lot more too. Ah, I see hands raised. Yes, the question remains. How do we, as writers, infuse our stories with characters who readers can't help but follow to the last page in the book? That's a valid question. I'll give you a couple of hints. By the way, I can't answer that in one podcast, but here are a few thoughts. First of all, give your characters meaningful choices with real stakes. Agency is about making decisions that matter. When your character stands at a crossroads, ensure both paths lead to a significant but different consequence. Second, allow your characters to fail and learn. It's not all about winning. Characters with strong agency do not always succeed. Failures reveal more about them than triumphs. In fact, most plotting structures you see will have an area of absolute lowest point where it appears that the entire the entire book is a failure. The entire story is a failure. That's an important element of building agency. Princess Leia's failed rescue attempt at Jabba's palace led to an even more dramatic escape that showcased her resourcefulness. Who can forget the image of Leia in chains, attached to the disgusting Jabba? And even more memorable, using those same chains to take charge and destroy her enemy. I love that scene. And I'm not a violent person, but he deserved it. Or it, as the case may be. Third, balance internal and external conflicts. Agency shines brightest when characters must overcome both the limitations and the obstacles the world places in their path. They have to feel they're making changes. They have to have an internal reason to make changes, but the world has to be part of it too. Han Solo's journey from self-interested smuggler to a committed rebel demonstrates this point beautifully. Fourth, let your characters surprise you. Oh, writers love that. Characters do tend to take over the story. Sometimes the most authentic agency emerges when you, as the writer, allow your characters to make choices you did not plan. Trust them to navigate that river of fate in ways that redirect the current. Finally, remember that agency exists even within constraints. Whether your story involves prophecies, societal limitations, or seemingly impossible odds, true character agency is about how people assert their will and identity within these boundaries. And your characters are people. Just as Elizabeth Benedict chose her own way within the rigid structure of her time. In the end, I believe compelling stories are not about whether fate or choice prevails. Rather, story happens in the dance between them, the river and the navigator, forever shaping each other in ways neither anticipate alone. This is KZ, bringing you another episode of Tales and Threads. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the Author's Voice podcast and let us know your thoughts about this and any of our discussions in the comments below. Happy reading.